Hello friends, welcome. In this video, I'll be discussing about accessory systems. Accessory systems are one of the silviculture systems. So before knowing, I'll give you a very brief and quick explanation on what are silviculture systems. See, silviculture systems are those set of procedures which are followed by the foresters in order to sustainably maintain the forest. So these are perfected on the basis of some established principles and rules which needs to be followed whenever a person is managing a forest. And when you say the forest management, it broadly includes the harvest of the existing trees in some particular pattern, and then regeneration of the trees. Whatever needs is cut down has to be replaced either naturally or artificially, and taking care of those trees which are growing from young age till they become or reach the stage of harvest. And finally you will be overall managing the forest in according to certain requirements. Say for example, if any species would like to have more sun, then more trees to be cut. If it is a shade lover or cyophyte, then more trees will form the canopy or something like that. So those set of procedures for handling a forest is what is known as the silviculture. So silviculture, and these systems are called as silviculture systems, a set of procedures according to which the forest is worked upon. Now in these silviculture systems, there is a very broad category of the high forest systems and the coppice forest systems. High forest silviculture systems are those systems which are applied to the forest which are originated from seedlings. So when you sow a crop or plant a crop, okay, so if you sow the seeds directly in the forest or sow the seeds in nurseries, let them become a sapling or seedling, then transplant it. So all of these are considered as the seedling origin. If the forest is been established by seedling origin, and if you are applying any silviculture system in those forests, it's called as high forest systems. Then there is a coppice forest systems. Coppice is a very old ancient technique which is followed in India since a very long time. So wherein if you cut down a tree at the ground level, then the lateral buds which are present at the base of the tree will start emerging out in as the individual branches, and they will grow individually, and there will be so many small stems which will arise from the base of the stem, and that is called as coppice. And any forest which is established under this coppice system, and those silviculture systems which are applied to these kind of forests are called as coppice forest silviculture systems. So under high forest systems, there are certain categories, like if you are felling a tree in concentrated way, it's called as system of concentrated regeneration. Okay. So then if you are felling in diffused way, there is system of diffused regeneration. Okay. And finally we have the accessory systems. Okay, so before moving on to accessory systems, I'll just very briefly let you know what are these system of concentrated regeneration and diffuse regeneration. When you fell a tree, if the felling is concentrated to a small part of the forest and not the entire forest, so you are working on felling and regenerating that small part and then moving on to another part of the forest. So those systems are system of concentrated regeneration. In this we have clear felling system. Okay. And we have shelter wood system. Okay. And under diffuse regeneration we have a system called as selection system. So it may be a uniform selection system or group selection system. So there are various things, so which you will be studying under their respective headings. But now we are interested in knowing accessory systems. This is where the accessory system stands. Now let us see what are these accessory systems. See, accessory systems are a kind of silviculture systems. Okay, so mainly comes under the category of high forest systems, definitely with seedling origin, and initially it will be of a even age. That means all the trees which would be planted will be having the same age, which means to say they will definitely be having the same height as well. But later on, after certain number of years or a certain period, it will end up being a irregular two-storied high forest system. So instead of having a single system, it will end up being a two-storied. Okay, so this is one story and this will be a second story. It will become a two-storied high forest system. It may be because of the manual intervention, or it may be sometimes even because of natural reasons. Okay, so these two four-storied systems are what is called as accessory systems. Okay, so that is the definition. Now, in under accessory systems, there are three major types which is mainly followed in India. So one is the two-storied high forest system. Then we have high forest system with reserve, and finally improvement felling system. Even though improvement felling system will have is not considered as one of the silviculture system, but it is put under the category of accessory systems. Okay. Okay. Two-storied high forest system. See, basically in two-storied high forest system, there is two clear-cut stratification of canopies belonging to two different species. There will be one set of forest which would have initially established, which we call it as higher canopy. So let us say this is, let me choose color. Okay. So this is one set of forest or trees which are at higher canopy. So these are seedling origin, okay, and belonging to say species 1. So they are even aged, they all were planted at the same time, they would have reached at a same height, and this forms the high canopy. Okay. And after some time, so we will establish the trees which belong to the lower canopy, so which will be of a different species. So this will be the species belonging to lower canopy. Okay. So this is species 2 and this is the lower canopy. So basically the lower canopy of the plants which are planted after the first species reaches certain height are obtained from the natural regeneration natural regeneration by seeds, okay, and these seeds might be obtained from different forest, adjacent forest, brought by wind, water, air, insects, because if the same species falls, then it cannot be called as the two-storied, there will be same species. So it has to be a different species, so it has to be from some other nearby forest where the seeds come and fall here, or it may be intentionally planted. You choose some of the compatible species which do not compete with the first species and plant it in the ground. So this becomes the second species. So other than this, if there is any growth which is under growing, so as a part of this first species or any other species, so that will be cleaned, okay. So underplanting is usually done once the main species reach the pole stage. So pole stage is a stage where the trees will be in between becoming a completely mature tree and the seedling. So usually the stages in the growth of a tree is considered as seed, seedling, sapling, pole, and finally the mature tree, which is called bole. So these are the different stages, and pole stage is a stage just before the maturity of the tree, and once it reaches that stage, we'll start planting the trees of different species under growth. Okay, there are any other things which will be cleaned. Now, what are the reasons for doing for this two-storied system? So TSHFS means two-storied. Okay, so high forest system. The advantages first and foremost is protection of soil. So once you grow anything underground, then the soil will not be exposed to wind and water, and those interspaces between the main species, first species, so that space will be covered. So they'll be covered and there is no scope for erosion. Then there will be increase in the growing stock. So the more denser, because these will be in different tiers, and the canopies will not be competing with each other, so there is no problem with the spacing. So even below the ground, the earlier trees will have deeper roots and the second species will have shallow roots, so there will be no competition even for nutrition and water, and so they won't be competing, and in that condition also they will be surviving. So there will be more dense planting and there will be more volume per unit area which you will be getting it because of this increased growing stock or increased number of trees. So this is also called as enrichment planting. We are enriching the forest with more number of trees without causing harm to the trees, so that you can get more yield and more income. Propagation of shade-loving and frost-tender trees. So if at all some species is a shade-loving which would like to go under shade, so it has to be given such kind of environment where it grows nicely without being exposed to sunlight. Say for example, coffee is a sciophyte or shade-loving tree. So you might have seen that in coffee plantations, the entire coffee plantation will be covered with the canopies of tall trees. So it is a shade-loving tree. So similarly, there are many species which are shade-loving, and in order to grow those shade-loving, you need one top layer of canopy to protect them from sunlight, so to propagate them. And those species which are frost tender, they are very sensitive to frost or low temperature. So in order to protect them from frost and snow, so you will be growing some of the trees in the upper canopy. Then to gradually change the composition, if at all you are growing one species and they would have lost their commercial value in the market, and if you want to replace them with other species, instantly you cannot replace them. So we will let some of the trees growing in the top canopy, and then slowly we will start changing the species. We will plant some different species in the underground, and as and when these grow, the older ones are taken out, and slowly the conversion will be done from one forest of one species to the forest of another species. Then to induce mixed communities, so usually monocropping is not always recommended in ecology. So ecology believes in having more diversity, biodiversity in mixed cropping. So it has its own advantage. So usually the pest attack will be lesser. So there will be good proper utilization of soil. So proper utilization of water and minerals, and high income. So there are many other things, and especially from the ecological purpose for creating the diversity or to have more diverse population. So you need to have a mixed communities, and in order to do that, this is one of the best method. And to obtain intermittent returns. Intermittent returns are those income which you obtain by felling and selling those trees before they reach the final harvest. See, forestry is one such occupation which has a very long gestation period. So the period from the time of establishment till the period where it is harvested, so this period, which we call it as a rotation period, is very, very long. Some trees will have rotation period of 100 years, 120 years, 140 years. So they'll have a very long period. So it's a very long wait for anyone to get the income. So usually it is a very general saying in forestry that what we sow we will never reap. So only the next generation will be able to reap it. So in that case, if at all you want some income to be obtained in between, so there is a activity in forestry which is called as thinning, where in middle of the growth of the crop, so the plants would be taken down at the pole stage if at all you feel that there is a overcrowding or if there is competing with each other, and those thinned trees makes certain amount of money, even though they would not fetch that much of money which the final big tree will fetch, but there will be some kind of income which keep on coming in the intermittent stage. And to obtain that intermittent research, we will be going for this two-storied high forest system. What are the disadvantage? First and foremost disadvantage is that it is difficult to imitate the underplanting. So usually not all the species are shade loving, and because some species requires the sunlight in the initial stage, even the shade loving plants require some amount of sunlight in the initial stage. So with the canopy covering the entire forest, or with the tall trees present in the forest, so it's not easy to achieve the growth of underplanting. It's very risky and very low rate. Okay, the success rate is very, very low. So it's a very difficult task. Then thinning of upper stage. So whenever you cut down the trees which are in the top canopy, so there are some trees in the bottom canopy. So if you cut down, they will definitely fall on the understories, and most of the times during the harvest of the top canopy, so the lower ones will get damaged. Okay, and underplanting affects the growth of upper story. Sometimes, even though we plan according to a lot of research and choose the compatible species, sometimes if there is a shortage of moisture or minerals, so the plant starts competing with each other. So there will be some kind of loss happening to both the species because of the competition, and this affects the growth and development of the trees, both understory and upper story. So that is one of the problem, that is one of the disadvantage. So this is what is the two-storied high forest system. Then there is high forest with reserve system. So this is another kind of accessory system where the selected trees are retained for part of the whole of the second rotation, and the trees are left without cutting even though they have reached maturity in the first rotation. So this is a stage where we sow the seed, and this small seed will become a tree and ready for harvest. Okay, all the trees, and after this a new set of regeneration will happen and the young one will replace this old tree. So this is called one rotation. So in this system, what will happen? Out of all the trees which needs to be cut down when they reach the rotation, Some trees will be left off without harvesting. Okay, they will be let off without harvesting and they occupy the forest. And the remaining species will be the next set of or next rotation species will be growing in between. So this also looks like a two-storied forest. There will be high forest with reserves. These are called as reserves. Okay. So the number of mature trees are kept reserved even after they complete the rotation. The reason is to get large size timber or some other local factors. Even though they have reached the rotation period, if you leave them, at least they will increase a little bit more in the size and fetch more income than what they would have got at the rotation period. So this is a kind of things. This is like earlier uncut, and when it is cut, these trees are retained and the next set of generation comes or grows as a under canopy. So next is improvement felling. So improvement felling, even though it is under the category of silviculture systems, this is not considered as a silviculture systems. The reason being, if at all you want to call a system as a silviculture system, it should aim at regeneration and it should produce crops of certain distinct characters. Distinct characters in the sense it should produce either even age forest or uneven age forest, regular or irregular kind of forest. It should result in some kind of pattern, okay, either even aged or uneven aged. But improvement felling doesn't result in any kind of distinct character of the forest, nor it aims at regeneration. So that for those two reasons, it is not considered as silviculture system. So here what we do, we fell the poor and degraded forest basically for the improvement of the existing and promising trees. So leaving those trees, we will be taking off the remaining plants which are usually not so good or which are poor in their growth. So we will remove the inferior growing stock in the interest of the better growth of more valuable trees. So mainly explained in uneven aged mixed forest. So in even aged, all of them will be even or same aged, so you cannot differentiate. But in uneven aged, there are some trees which will be poor growth or which would have left behind in the social competition. So those trees would be removed. What are the operations being done here in improvement felling? So felling of the trees which are saleable, which will fetch some money, but still they are unsound or over mature trees. So when you categorize them, those trees which are over mature, which are unsound, which are diseased, which are deformed, so which do not have proper single straight bole, so those trees are cut down and they are removed from the forest. Felling of badly shaped immature trees as well, which have no promise of becoming a better ones in future. So thinning is done, removal of the trees which are competing with the promising better ones. Then cutting back malformed or damaged saplings. Removal of undesirable boles of the valuable species. The undesirable boles are those ones which are either crooked, either infected or diseased or being attacked by insects, or not showing any promising results that this will become a better one or will yield us better yield in the future. And also cutting off the climbers. Climbers will restrict the girth improvement and they will create the defects in wood post harvest. So those climbers are also cut in improvement felling. Okay, it's a kind of cultural operation which is done for the betterment of the forest. So there was a question in UPSC Indian Forest Service mains in Forestry Optional in 2023 that what are accessory systems, and they have particularly asked about describe the two-storied high forest system for 10 marks. Okay, so hope whatever the knowledge which we have discussed will be good enough for you to answer this question. So try writing those answers, and thank you so much we'll be coming up with more interesting videos on interesting topics in our next class. Thank you so much.